And welcome to another 30 minutes of Point of View. I'm Pastor Josh Barnes, and this is co-host Justin Barnes. And this is the show where we're unashamed to look at issues from a biblical point of view, biblical perspective. And we do that because Jesus died on the cross, proving that what he said was true and that he was really God. And he said that the Bible is true. So, long story, we could go through that one day, but that's the long and short of it, basically. And so, therefore, if we want to be right about issues, we've got to be biblical about them. That's the goal of the show, just to help people be more biblical about these issues, approach them from a biblical side. And that's really the goal here. So today, before we get started, actually, yesterday, we ran out of time. I say yesterday, but we record this all at one time. And it actually plays on K-Star Conservative Radio Network. So it's kind of, when it plays on K-Star, it's all at one time too. But then when it goes on FISM TV and Right America Media and YouTube, it actually is split up into 5 days. So it may be today for you, or it just may be, that you heard last show 30 minutes ago. So whatever. But we forgot to talk about our sponsors. And so Justin and I don't make any money personally from these sponsors, but they do allow us to stay on the air. And so we have MyPillow and White Mountain Munchies. I just moved, and you can see that in the background that everything's kind of still in disarray. But White Mountain Munchies, an amazing snack food that's actually non-GMO, gluten-free. Anybody can eat it. It's great, and it's resealable pouches, super tasty, and not expensive at all. It's actually really good. Well priced, and if you use the promo code RAM on whitemountainmunchies.com, you get a discount, plus you get to support shows like Point of View. You can also use the promo code RAM, RAM, at MyPillow and get the same discount. Actually, not the same. It's a much bigger discount even at MyPillow. Some amazing discounts, and you get to support shows like Point of View on Right America Media Network. So it's great. Had to get that little plug in before I forget, because we may run out of time. Justin's got a big issue for us today. Today, I think we're talking about Black Lives Matter, and I'm going to actually disappear here for a second because I'd rather him take all the heat for whatever he's about to say.
Yeah. So you got me? Okay, there we go. Yeah, so recently I've been thinking about this whole Black Lives Matter thing, and especially over the past week. And I came to the point where I thought, there's a statement that needs to be made, and it's this: Black Lives Matter, and here's why. Because over the past couple years, actually, I think going back in several years now, but especially over the past year since George Floyd, there's been a lot of ruckus about this phrase that is seemingly innocuous. It's Black Lives Matter, which pretty much everyone except for the guy running around in a goofy hood agrees with. Black Lives Matter. Okay. Except for the problem has been that there's a semantic overload to this phrase now. And what I mean by that is when a phrase takes on so much meaning that just using the phrase doesn't clarify what you're talking about. There's a semantic overload. And when we say Black Lives Matter, the fight usually comes from, well, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the proposition that the lives of Black men and women and children and Black people in general, that those have worth and value? Or are you talking about the Black Lives Matter organization? There's been quite the kerfuffle from that. And usually you're going to find one of two camps. On one side, there's going to be people demanding that you recite Black Lives Matter with no qualifications. You can't say, okay, yes, they matter, but not the organization. No qualifications, just repeat the line. And then on the other side, there's going to be a group of people who insist, well, no, what we really need to talk about is all lives matter, which I don't find particularly helpful either, because it seems more of a dodge than actually addressing what's important. And it's completely missing the boat, because there's something that we haven't talked about in this entire thing, at least not on a broad scope. We haven't discussed this very well. And that is, there is a word in this phrase that we take for granted that I don't think we should. It's the word matter. Black lives matter. You see, except for the rare person, again, who dresses like a bad Halloween ghost, everyone agrees that Black lives matter. It's a given. But why? Why do Black lives matter? That's what needs to be discussed. In fact, why do any lives matter? Why does anything at all matter? You see, we all accept that the proposition that Black lives matter. Again, except for your odd racist. We all accept that. But our society, our culture, has brought a load of presuppositions to this discussion now that totally cut it off at the knees. The whole idea of Black lives mattering is completely assaulted by our culture today. You say, no, our culture loves Black Lives Matter. Yes, but they can't substantiate why. What do I mean? Our culture presupposes that God does not exist. It presupposes that we are the result of evolutionary chance. Just matter and motion and molecules, to alliterate it for all the Baptist preachers out there. It's just a bunch of stuff that just so happened to form itself the way it is now. Complete chance, no organizing thing, no God, no intelligence, no nothing, no purpose, no plan, no. But the problem is, when that's your presuppositions, there's no worth or value, not any ultimate worth. There might be subjective worth, just like I might value a steak and a vegan might value hamster food. We can have subjective worth, but we can't impose that on each other. I'm never going to like your stupid salad. I'm sorry. Some salads are fine, but you get the point. The point is that if you want to get past, well, it's my preference, and you want to get to, it actually has worth and value, our culture has completely thrown that away. Just because people accept it doesn't mean that it's true. What is the grounding for this claim? Black Lives Matter. What's the grounding? So in other words, let me put this a little more practically. Say that Michelin Man pretend guy comes up to you with his funny white traffic cone helmet on, and he tells you Black lives don't matter because he's a Klansman, and I don't believe Black lives matter. What is your argument? What are you going to appeal to show him that Black lives do matter? Well, you got a few options. Well, I feel like what you're doing is wrong. To which he will respond, and I don't care. So that's your feelings. I feel like what I'm doing isn't wrong, or I don't care if it's wrong, or there's no such thing as wrong. What are you going to appeal to reject that claim? You say, well, everyone agrees with me. Which, by the way, clearly not, because you're having this conversation with a guy dressed up in his mother's white bathrobe. You can't claim that everyone agrees with you if there's someone that disagrees with you. He clearly doesn't. So if this is not just a universally accepted truth, what are you going to appeal to establish that it is actually a truth, whether you believe it or not? Because you're making a claim that not everyone recognizes. Not everyone recognizes that Black Lives Matter. And you go back throughout history, we could do this with pretty much every ethnic group. Hitler sure didn't recognize that Jewish lives matter. So what are you going to appeal to? Was he just right by his own opinion? And is that actual rare but actual American racist? Is he right? Just because it comes down to opinion? And by the way, since when did majority opinion determine morality? Some of the greatest atrocities in human history were done under the guise of majority opinion. So that doesn't determine right or wrong. You say, well, it's the law. Actually, being a racist is not against the law. It's not good, but it's not illegal. Not finding worth and value in somebody's life is not illegal. Acting on it, maybe, but holding that opinion isn't illegal. You say, okay, well, it comes down to what's good for the human race. So we structure society in a way that it's just about what's good for the human race. Okay, what if they don't care about that? If someone doesn't care about society, what happens when you have the Joker who just wants to watch the world burn? It's a good illustration. I'm not saying the Joker's a real person, but what about the people who don't give a darn about human flourishing? What is your argument to them? Hey, that's not good for humanity. So, I don't care. It sounds like you're just on a subjective opinion. And subjective opinions only give you subjective results. The ironic thing is that most of the people who march for Black Lives Matter, if they were consistent with their worldview that has removed God, would have to admit that Black lives don't actually matter in any ultimate sense. They don't. They matter to me, but it's not real. It's just a personal preference. Are you really willing to say Black Lives Matter is a personal preference? I'm not. This is why you have to have the Christian worldview. That's what point of view is all about. I mean, applying the Christian worldview to everyday issues. And if we apply it to Black Lives Matter, what we see is that as a Christian, I have grounding to say Black Lives Matter. Why? Because God said that Black Lives Matter. How do I know that? Well, God has said that he made man of one blood. In Acts chapter 17, Paul says that God made us all of the same stuff, basically. We're all men, every ethnicity. And then God placed us in different places, but we're all men. We are brothers in the brotherhood of men by God's design. Not only that, but God created us in his image. And God, who created us in his image, strictly prohibits mistreating your fellow man. Why? Because you are equal. He constantly reaffirms the value of human life, and ultimately, God gave the clearest demonstration that Black Lives Matter when he died on the cross for men from every tribe and tongue and nation and people. And when he rose from the dead, he told his disciples, go preach the gospel to pantata ethne, every people group, every nation, every ethnicity. So of course he believes Black Lives Matter. And in the book of Revelation, when you see the people around the throne, it's men from every tribe and tongue and nation and people. And I'm not saying that's a direct quote, but it's this vastly diverse group of people from every ethnicity there is. So God said Black Lives Matter. That's why Black Lives Matter, because he's the creator. He's the one that gives me worth and value. He's the one that is the reason I have any purpose in life. So do Black Lives matter to God? Well, of course. You say, okay, well, then what's the big deal? I mean, so you get there from a Christian perspective, I get there from a non-Christian perspective. We both have the same conclusion, so it just doesn't really matter, right? Quite the contrary, actually. You see, so far we've established that Black lives only actually matter if you have God. They don't have any ultimate sense in which they matter unless you have God. Small problem. You don't get to pick and choose what you like about God. You say, well, I'm good with that. God doesn't like injustice, and we're fighting injustice, so we're cool with the whole God thing. Okay, we'll take God gives value, sure, whatever. Except for he has a few more rules than that. And this is where we have to bring the Black Lives Matter organization back in. Because so far, I want to reach the hand across the aisle and say, Black Lives Matter. Absolutely. I affirm the individual dignity and worth inherent in every single life of every single Black person on this planet. Unquestionably. But now we need to talk about the organization, because the reason I have a problem with that organization is because God said Black Lives Matter. And he's the reason I can say that. What do I mean? Well, let me read you a few excerpts from the Black Lives Matter What We Believe page. Now, it's not there anymore. Not just the particulars that I'm about to read. The entire page is gone. If you go there, there's like an About Us now, and it's a very abridged bit. But this is what they used to have on the site before it got a lot of backlash. Let me read you a few excerpts. Quote, "We are self-reflexive and do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift Black trans folk, especially Black trans women who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonistic violence." How about another one? Quote, "We foster a queer affirming network. When we gather, we do so with the intention of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking, or rather, the belief that that all in the world are heterosexual unless she, he, or they disclose otherwise." End quote. One more, quote, "We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable." So, the transgender movement, homosexuality, and the breaking up of the nuclear family are the explicit goals of the Black Lives Matter organization. Which, by the way, shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, these things have been there's been a lot of incentive for corporations to capitulate on this, shall we say. But let's go through these, shall we? Let's apply okay, we have to have God for value. If we want to say Black Lives Matter, we have to have God. All right, let's apply God to Black Lives Matter, the organization. What does he say about this? Well, concerning transgenderism, which they are promoting, there's even Black Trans Lives Matter marches and things. Well, God made it very clear that he formed you in your mother's womb. That's in Psalm 139. He forms people in their mother's womb, which just so happens to be where he assigns you your biological sex. So to suggest that you are in the wrong body is to suggest that God made a mistake. In other words, it's an assault on God's right, his sovereign right to choose how he created you. That's not okay. If you want to believe that Black Lives Matter, you have to, and you want to live consistently with that belief, you have to reject the transgender movement. Same thing goes for homosexuality. God defined the parameters of human sexuality and how it is to be expressed. God has said that not just homosexual acts, but heterosexual acts that are outside of the covenant of marriage are sin. Period. He has the right to say that. And to go against that is to assault God's right to define the parameters of human sexuality, which he created and he designed. So, if you want to believe that Black Lives Matter and you want to live consistent with that belief, you have to reject the homosexual movement. And how about the nuclear family? Well, it's really not the Western prescribed nuclear family. It's the God-commanded nuclear family. God created the family, and he said, man and woman leave father and mother, come together, become one flesh. They have children who leave father and mother, come together, one flesh. That's the family. The nuclear family is God's command. But this means that the near 70% fatherless rate in the Black community, in the Black population in America, is a terrible problem. 70% of children in the black population of this country are growing up without parents, or without both parents, without their father specifically. You say, well, hang on, those rates are high amongst all ethnicities. Well, yeah, but we're talking about black lives, not all lives, right? I mean, I was told that's how the rules work. We can't talk about the other people. We're talking about this one group. But regardless, the sky-high fatherless rate across the nation is awful. And it's an assault on God's right to define how the family works. If you want God to define the fact that Black Lives Matter, you have to have God to reject the dismantling of the Western prescribed nuclear family, the promotion of homosexuality, the promotion of transgenderism. If you want to live consistent with the claim that Black Lives Matter, you have to take the rest of God that comes with it. It is a package deal. You cannot pick and choose. I am not willing to let you take my worldview to apply worth and value claims to your movement while not accepting anything else from my worldview. So yes, Black Lives Matter, and God is why. We need to consider this. Josh, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's not a whole lot more to say, except I can say it in a different way. That's really all I'm going to do. But this is so right. You hit the nail on the head. I probably my favorite thing that you said was that the reason you reject the organization Black Lives Matter is because Black lives actually do matter. And if Black lives mattered to Black Lives Matter, we would be behind them. We're not against them because of their name. We're against them because they don't live up to their name. And that's a big difference. But, it reminded me of Matthew chapter 1, where we have the genealogy of Jesus. And, of course, we don't have a full genealogy of Jesus in Matthew 1, but he specifically chooses certain people to mention. In those are non-Jewish women. Now, this deals with both the idea of sexism and the idea, like real sexism, not the sexism that people like to say exists, but actual sexism and the idea of racism. Because in the lineage of Jesus that Matthew mentions is a woman named Rahab, who was slated to be destroyed because of the wickedness of her nation. And because she turned to God, God not only saved her, made her part of the chosen people, but also put her in the line of Jesus. And Ruth, who was another wicked nation, who was always antagonizing God's people. And she chose to follow God instead and became the, great-great-grandmother of David. And actually, God gave a special amount of grace to her because technically, if she had joined Israel just normally and just said, I want to become a Jew, I want to start following the law of God, she wouldn't have been considered a real Israelite, or her children, or her grandchildren, or great-grandchildren, up to, I think, 5 generations. So David would never have been part of actually been a Jew, except that she married Boaz and married into the Jewish line, and therefore her descendants could then be considered Jews. But it's amazing how the Jews actually were racist against Ruth, and yet God shows how it's not about her race. Like, the reason that her nation was under condemnation was not because they were a different race, but because they had rejected God, and that's really the only difference. There's only 2 types of people. There are people who accept and follow and are faithful to the one true God, and there are people who have rejected and refused to follow the one true God and make Christ Lord of their lives. And that's really the 2 different types of people there are, and that's the only thing that makes us different. It should never make us hate one another. It should make us love each other more because of this one difference.
Yeah, and what I wanted to do with this monologue of sorts. And it's actually, I wrote an article that's going to be posted on Right America Media that's called Black Lives Matter, Here's Why. It's going to be on ramtv.live. My entire purpose with this was I want to reach a hand across the aisle here. I'm going to say Black Lives Matter, but I want to do it in a way that furthers the discussion to say, can we consider that phrase? Let's examine the word matter. Because we could debate the politics of this till the cows come home, and I'm not interested in it. Because I think, like I said, both sides, I think, are kind of unhelpful in this one, where you either have to repeat it without distinction or all lives matter, that sort of thing. No. Let's get to the theology that you're bringing to the table. Because whether people want to admit it or not, they are bringing a theology to the table. And them claiming Black Lives Matter, us all claiming Black Lives Matter, is bringing theology to the table because we're making a claim about value. And that's something you simply can't have, objective, transcendent value, unless you have God. It's not going to, you can't do it. The best atheistic attempts fall dismally short. And if one simple question, according to what standard? If that is a devastating critique of your worldview, you need to rethink your worldview. Because you can't have it both ways. We know that Black Lives Matter. We have that built in us.
But I will say
but only one
thing.
of us can make sense of that.
I personally reject the term. I take issue with the idea that something can be, that people should be defined by their skin color. Black lives. I'm just imagining someone calling me and saying, you have a white life. And I'm just thinking, my life has nothing to do with my skin color. And that's just a weird term. I understand what it means. And it means that people with this ethnical background, their lives matter. And I get that. But I do hate the phrase just because I think it's so centered around the wrong thinking. We got 60 seconds. I'll give you one more comment after mine and then we'll close it.
Well, I think that's fair. I just think that there's something far more important to get to in the conversation. Like, I think we've been so bogged down in the weeds that what we really need to get at is the heart here. And the heart here is the claim of worth. That's, I think, where the conversation needs to go.
Yeah, absolutely right. Guys, thanks for watching Point of View today. Don't forget to check out our sponsors. Help us promote the show. Tell your friends and family about it. And don't forget that to be right about issues, you're going to have to be biblical about them. That's what we're all about, to help you be more biblical about issues. And in order to be biblical, you're going to have to know what the Bible says. You're going to have to trust in Jesus Christ. You're going to start with the foundation that the gospel is true, that Jesus died on the cross for our sins. Trust in Jesus Christ. And we will see you next time right here on Point of View.